Council for the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for July 15th, 2024. We have a number of items on our agenda tonight. Item number one is a 2025 budget request from several of our community groups. Item number two is Community Partners Grant Program, the committee budget recommendations for that item. Number three is the Lutheran Legacy Campus, the city-initiated rezoning. And number four is the city charter update, a draft ordinance. We will start this meeting, as we do most of our meetings, with public comment, in this case, in a study session for items that are on the agenda. So we have one person signed up to speak online. This is Susan Wade. Ms. Wade, if you are here, would you please unmute yourself, give us your first name and your last name, and tell us which item you are speaking on.
Mayor, I don't see a participant online.
Okay, we're going to give her just a couple of more minutes just to make sure that we have her or don't.
No, I suppose we should just make sure that Ms. Wade is not in fact in chambers.
Okay. Susan Wade is not here in chambers with us tonight, is she? If you are, please come to the podium. All right, so we don't see her online?
No, Mayor.
Okay, we will conclude our public's right to speak, and we will go to agenda item number one. This is our 2025 budget requests from three associations here in the city. Mr. Goff, do we have a presentation on this item?
We do have. We have three presentations. We'll start with the Wheat Ridge Business District. I believe our is Chelsea? No, you see her up there, Alice? No, Chelsea Bunker. I think our presenters have called in sick this evening, so I believe Mayor Pro Tem Stites and Mayor Starker are going to take this item. They're both on the Wheat Ridge Business District Board.
We're going to rely on the Mayor Pro Tem to do this. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I apologize. I didn't have a whole lot of time to prepare on this. We have the business district has been around for several years, started by, I believe, around the same time as Local Works and Wheat Ridge 2020, back with the original NRS. But myself, the mayor, Councilor Weaver, all serve on the board, as well as Treasurer DeTulio and many other business owners in the community. This year, we're asking for $90,000, $45,000 for matching grants, and $45,000 for our commercial exterior grant program. If you look through some of the success stories we've had through here, you can kind of go down the timeline of many of the grants given out to the businesses, and you can see there's a lot of successful businesses in the city in there. I think Grammy's Goodies is a big one that we've worked with, as well as the owners of the building that Stylus and Crate is in now, Mestizo, and many others. So I can answer any questions if you have them. Most of our grants, we don't tend to, I believe, get the $90,000 from the city all at once. We tend to submit grant proposals to the treasurer, to the city, and get reimbursed as those come up. So, and as you look in the memo here, we have about $93,500 in outstanding grants that are already being worked on.
Okay, thank you for that brief presentation. We'll go to questions from council. Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So I have two questions. One is how does the city and its partners reach businesses to let them know about the availability of this program? Is there I'm sure there's general stuff, but is there targeted or systematic ways that we reach businesses and let them know?
That's a great question. So Chelsea Bunker is our staff, her company for the business district. She reaches out to all the new businesses that are coming online. I know she and I met with like Third Shot Pickleball and things like that as they were coming online, and talked about some ways that the business district could help them. And we also send out mailings, and I wish I had one with me, but if you look at the video and some of the other stuff that are on there, we've sent out postcards to the businesses. I know we're gearing up to send another round of postcards here in the next couple of months, just to get the name out again. I think that right after COVID, there was a lot of people looking to spend a lot of money, and that's it's slowed down a little bit. So we're not seeing a lot of grant applications, but that kind of goes in cycles, I think. So things are expensive, construction's expensive. So we're not giving out quite as much as we were previous.
And then my second question is, I mean, it seems like, through our planning, we identify certain like areas that we as a city are investing in. Is there any like evaluation criteria or alignment around areas that we've identified are primed for reinvestment? And that's an open-ended question. And one of the things I find myself thinking about is that we've got a lot of businesses struggling on Wadsworth due to the impacts of construction. So I feel like I'm just curious if there's strategic outreach or like areas that get priority because either they've been identified for economic development or they're being negatively impacted by things we're doing to invest in ourselves as a city.
I think that there's not been a whole lot of systematic, but there's not a whole lot of, as far as our bylaws as the business district goes right now without changing them. Unless they're doing signs or construction, things like that, business facade improvements, things like that, we would have to change our model to do that. I think that there's other, like Local Works is doing their programs to help Wadsworth, the chamber, things like that, would be a little more nimble to help with that. But it's not something I'm not sympathetic to. So it's definitely something we as a board can consider.
Yeah, I think it would be good if not targeting bylaws, at least on strategic outreach and, and recognizing, the business owner and the property owner. I know you know this, might have different interests in pursuing that. So I think it would be really good because we're, as a city, identifying corridors, but as somebody whose district is really impacted and a lot of business owners impacted by Wadsworth, signage is exceptionally important to them right now. So if the board could take that under consideration as it reviews how it moves forward with this, that would be appreciated.
One of our board members is property owner on Wadsworth, and that's something he's brought to our attention several times, something we're working on. So yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Councilor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Stites, for your presentation. I sat on this board for over a decade, and it started where it was only businesses on 38th Avenue that could apply, and then it got expanded to the city as a whole. And once the expansion to the city as a whole, and then brought on the new facade, like major facade program, I think that the Wheat Ridge Business District has done some really great things in investments in our community. One kind of comment to Council Member Haltines is oftentimes, though, while the basis of the business district is very much brick and mortar, sometimes things come up and they really have to really decide if that's like a mission creep on, kind of their mission, which was really to eliminate blight in our community. But I do know that they do some outreach if we notice that somebody's building is in disarray, or if they notice that somebody's signage has been damaged, then they do reach out to people. So here's my one question though, is I see that you guys have currently 93,500 basically encumbered funds. What do you guys have available other than that? Are you guys running out of, is that what you have available is what you have encumbered, or do you have some kind of a little bit more availability? So if you get the 90,000 from us, then you still potentially could do a little bit more than 90,000 in the community, or is it just going to be the 90,000 for the year?
And I apologize for not having those numbers in
Yeah,
front of me.
and I apologize for hitting you with a question that
That's a
may
good
not
question.
have the
Though.
finances.
We do, I believe, have some funds in reserve, but I don't know how much exactly. So I apologize for not knowing that. But it's I won't give a number.
Yeah, and absolutely, I support this program. It's done an amazing job in our community in removing blight in our community and also helping, maybe not blight, but property owners wanting to upgrade and kind of bring a new, fresh look to their facade. And so I appreciate you guys, your work, and I say thanks to the board for
Thank you. And just to add on to that, I think that one of the things that we've identified as a council is that the existing business, retail establishments are not conducive to business as today. So this is a program that definitely helps those businesses and those property owners upgrade their buildings to be able to do business in today's environment. So.
Thank you. Councilor Dozman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you for the presentation. So there are some businesses that are duplicated. So some in the same year or some in years after. And while the spreadsheet indicates, the grant amount, if it was a sign improvement or facade improvement and such, but can you let us know about the criteria of can a business apply multiple times in any given year? Is there any kind of waiting period? And if it's a matter of so Iceland Chiropractic is one of the ones in 2018 on here twice. And then, Swiss Flowers on here a couple times, but in different years.
I think you find if they're duplicated, they tend to be because they applied for different grants. So they may have applied for a sign grant and then come back for like a facade plus or something else later on. So you kind of see there's not, I don't believe, a whole lot of duplicates. And then you may see where a property owner or a business might have switched. So you might see that the same address might be used twice, but the business might have sold and the new business got a sign grant or something like that a few years later. We do have criteria as far as if you apply for a grant, there's a waiting period to be able to apply for another grant in the same category. There's also, we have some criteria as far as how long a business has to stay open, or the property owner must have that property, so they can't just do the improvement, sell it, and realize that they have to give that money back. So, and we've had that once or twice as well. So there is criteria.
Okay, so then would it be possible that the Iceland Chiropractic is duplicated in 2018? Because it basically has line items on the same columns. And so
I'm
it
gonna
looks as if they've.
Yes, that's a duplicate, but I didn't prepare
Okay.
the reports. I'm not sure. But that looks like. a
I mean, there's
duplicate to me.
there's different amounts, so that's a little confusing. And then some of them are among columns with the same either sign improvement grant or facade grant. So it would appear that they've received, and I don't know if that
And what it may
total
be-
grant amount is an aggregate amount of
Yeah, what it may be, and I apologize, is that they might have applied for several different grants, and that's how it's listed, and it's broken down. So if somebody applies for a bunch of grants at the same time, then they might get a sign grant, a facade, or not a facade, but a visual impact grant. They could do an ADA bathroom grant all at the same time, and so there might be several grants that are broken up in those line items, and that's why it's listed several times. But
Chelsea's online now, if she
she
can help
might know
answer
a little
any
better than I
questions.
can answer on that, but that's probably why.
I don't know if she heard that exchange and can speak to it maybe.
Chelsea,
Hi,
did
can
you
you
hear the
guys hear
question?
me?
Chelsea, are you online with us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes. And I don't know whether you
Hi.
heard the last question and had anything to add to that.
Hi, yeah, I did hear the question from Councilwoman Dozman. I do believe that is just a duplicate. That must be a mistake in the report from 2018 for Iceland. So we can look back at that and confirm those numbers.
Okay, and then maybe just for the good of the public, if someone, either Councilmember Stites or Chelsea, if you can maybe speak to the criteria and the application process and how it is that you determine what within each of these columns and give us a better idea of how that's allocated?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I was trying to share my screen, but I don't think it will let me. I was going to just pull up the different grants that are available. But we do have the different business improvement grants. We have a matching grant program for various facade improvements, sign improvements, even architectural design assistance, accessibility projects, visual impact projects, which is a little bit more of a flexible grant that we can work with businesses on, landscaping projects and exterior paint grants as well. And then some of our more recently added programs are the mural grant program and the larger, Councilwoman Hoppy mentioned this, the larger commercial exterior grant program that used to be called the Facade Plus program. So the requirements are commercial properties within Wheat Ridge or business owners within Wheat Ridge that have the sign off of the commercial property owner. And our board reviews grant applications as they come in monthly to review the project, the quotes, kind of the overall vision and ideas that the business or commercial property owner is working on. And then the board members very much review each project case by case and really dive into the numbers, the costs, and then potentially award up to a 50% match, up to certain numbers of what the business is requesting for each of those projects.
So yeah, you actually just brought up and touched on something that I really wanted to highlight, in that this is a matching grant program. So these are businesses that are already investing in improvements of various kinds. And so the Wheat Ridge Business District is really helping them and giving them matching funds that they are already investing in. So it's not just a subsidy on the part of the city, it's also, you know, a business investment from their end as well.
Correct. And we like to incentivize businesses to make these improvements by offering the matching grants. So we do, I know one of the questions earlier was, how are we reaching the businesses? We are regularly doing mailings to the commercial properties in Wheat Ridge. Sometimes we target specific corridors. Sometimes we send a mailing to everyone. We also have social media and social media ads, as well as advertisements in local publications, and then partnerships with the city and the city connections and things like that. And that a great example of that is the video that was in the memo on the agenda that was in collaboration with the city of Wheat Ridge and economic development to get that video published.
Thank you. Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. Chelsea, if you wouldn't mind, one more time, please, the best way to find more information about the grant program.
Sure. The best way is the website, wrbusinessdistrict.org. I also I apologize, I can't share my screen. I do have a presentation with more information. I'd be happy to email that to each of you. And I do have, I know one of the questions earlier was about current assets and reserves. I do have that information as well.
Thank you. And to just very quickly follow up, in looking at the sheet that was provided to the council here, the first 3 years, 90% of all the grants were awarded to businesses east of, I believe, east of Wadsworth. And then starting in 2021, District 4 kind of caught up, and there have been several projects that have been funded in that part of the city. And I really do appreciate that. Although, to the point that was raised earlier about some stipulations or requirements for receiving a grant, that the business stay in business. And I can notice one that was granted in 2021, that was granted a $5,900 grant that is now out of business. What are the sort of rules on that in terms of after you get a grant, staying in business?
Yeah, we do have a contract and general conditions agreement that must be signed and notarized by the business owner and or property owner if they're not the same person. And within that agreement, the business is signing that they basically could be required to pay back a prorated amount of the grants given.
Okay. All right, fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Snell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quick question for Chelsea and/or Mayor Pro Tem Stites. Just wondering, it says there are seven pending awards for this year. Are those included on the spreadsheet that we have in our packet?
Great question. Thank you for asking that. No, they are not. So what you see on the spreadsheet in the agenda packet is grant funding that has been dispersed. The Wheat Ridge Business District Board actively reviews applications on a monthly rolling basis. So the $93,000+ are grants that we have awarded, but these are reimbursement grants, so the business must pay and pay their contractors, pay their companies before we will reimburse them for these grant funds. So we ensure that the work is done and the contractors are paid before we send the payments out. So what you're seeing on that spreadsheet is checks that have been approved and cut and sent to businesses, and then the 93,000 is grants in process. So they have been notified that they have been awarded this funding, and that's pending obviously the project being completed and their contractors being paid. And then we will go ahead and reimburse those grant funds. So you can see that $93,000+ that we have kind of out there committed and pending. Right now, we're only halfway through 2024. We feel good about, we're actively helping businesses and we are not sitting on a lot of reserve funding. Let me pull those numbers up and let you know. And I'm sorry you don't have it in front of you. So as of June 30th, 2024, we have just over $144,000 in our bank account as our current assets. And then our liabilities are actually closer to $95,000. We're halfway through the year. And as you see in the budget request, we're requesting $90,000 total for 2025. Which is what we have requested, I believe, for the last 6 years, I believe. 90,000 is what we've requested each year.
Thank you. Counselor Dozeman.
Thank you. The Wheat Ridge Business District receives its funding solely from the city, correct? So there are no other mechanisms in which they receive funding? Okay.
Correct.
Any further questions? I think the Wheat Ridge Business District is looking for a consensus to approve their budget ask, which is $90,000. Do we have consensus to approve that? We do. Thank you very much. Chelsea, thank you very much for joining us today. Okay, we'll go to our next agency. It looks like we've got the Carnation Festival group coming up. And someone is coming to the fore. Okay, it is Wheat Ridge Treasurer.
Treasurer Miller?
Treasurer Miller. Oh, you've got a movie for us, a cartoon.
Thank you, everyone. I will be playing Joe DeMott in tonight's performance. You get the understudies tonight. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. So the Carnation Festival, you might have heard of it. It's a 3-day festival every year in Anderson Park. It includes 2 nights of fireworks. We have a carnival and a circus, a parade on 30th Avenue, and a mayor's reception on the Thursday before at the Richard Hart Estate, where we recognize those in the community that have made significant contributions. Next page. Attendance. We have access to some attendance data where we can kind of zoom in on certain parts of the city, Anderson Park, and see how many people were at the festival over the certain number of days. Interestingly enough, when we add in the park plus the parade on 38th on Saturday, we have about 33,400 people that come to the Wheat Ridge Carnation Festival at both those locations over those 3 days. The attendance at the park is 29,600, and we have an average day of just about 2.5 hours. So anybody that knows anything about how long people stay in parks, that's pretty good. Now, that's the average number. A lot of people stay longer, some people stay less, but on average, that's the total. And at the parade, there's 3,800 people, and the average stay is about 65 minutes. So those are some pretty interesting stats and impressive numbers. We're always kind of blown away every year and how much busier it gets and how more popular it is and so forth. When you look at where people are coming from, a lot of people from District 4, a lot of people from Arvada, even we're drawing people in from West Denver as well. So it's interesting, not just this is becoming not just a Wheat Ridge Festival, but really a west side of town festival as well. I think it's a fireworks. Everybody really wants to come in and enjoy those because a lot of fireworks shows are being canceled these days, unfortunately. Next up is Anderson Park. So in the park itself, we have about 50 local restaurant and retail vendors. We have live music all 3 days of the festival. This year, we're going to have about 15 different bands come in. So we support local artists and those in the music and entertainment industry. Some other things that happen in the park, it's not just the festival itself. We have a fine art show that is run by the Wheat Ridge Art League. We have a spaghetti dinner, which supports West Metro Fire Protection District. And we also have a couple of contests, the chili cook-off and the pie contest, and the proceeds from those, they're not much, but a little bit, those go to support local nonprofits. So we're proud of all those little events that happen within the festival and the support that we can provide and give back to the community. Next up, we have our local service club partnerships. I think this is really important to note because what the festival does is that we partner with the Wheat Ridge Rotary, the Optimist, the Kiwanis to sell our beer at the festival. This turns out to be a major fundraiser for those organizations. So we help them and they give back to the community. Essentially, we sell them the kegs of beer. They turn around and sell those to the people that participate, that want to drive, get the beer or purchase beer. And then that's our revenue. So the festival itself, we do have one booth that belongs to us, but we share that money and we try to give back to the festival, give back to the community through the festival. So it's just not all money towards the festival, and that kind of impacts our budget requests every year. We all know that the Wheat Ridge Rotary, they have scholarship funds that support local youth. The Optimist raises money to support youth impacted by autism, and they also have their holiday gift and coat drive for needy families. And the Kiwanis, they have programs that support local schools. The parade on 38th Avenue. The parade supports many organizations such as local schools, small businesses, nonprofits. Usually we have 60 plus schools and small businesses and nonprofits that participate in that event every year. It's a time-honored tradition where the community comes out to celebrate what makes Wheat Ridge special and our home. And again, we have about 3,800 people that come and attend that every year, including a contingent from the city of Wheat Ridge.
Known as the contingent.
Yes. Okay, so overall, our budget is always, we have a target for a break-even budget. In the packet, I have more details on where these numbers come from, but overall, we have about $250,000, I'm rounding, in revenue, and we're budgeting about $250,000 in expenses. Last year, the contribution from the city for this year's festival, budgeted last year, appropriated this year, was $125,000. We're asking for $10,000 more for this for next year in this round of appropriation. and that represents about 53% of our overall budget. The bank balance at the beginning of this year was about $41,000. We think we're going to maybe lose about $5. We've been losing a little bit every year. This year, with the cost of everything going up, it might be about that. We won't know. A lot of things happen the week of, and unfortunately, we just don't know until we kind of get the invoices and settle up. But overall, we're looking pretty good, and we expect to about break even this year as well. So we estimate that we'll end the year with about $35,000 in the bank, and that will be kind of our starting fund balance, more or less, for next year's festival. And that's all I had.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions?
All right, thank you, Chris. Questions? Mayor Pro Tem Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Treasurer Miller. I think I love the festival, love the parade, love the everything. I think I'm 41. I've been in the parade or on the parade for like 40 of the 41 years. But I guess my question is, one of the things I remember when I was a kid was you'd see the sponsorships up and down 38th Avenue and things like that. And I know we don't own all the poles, but how's sponsorships? How's that going? Are we bringing in enough funds? I know I kick in my bid every year, but
Well, our sponsors ships are coming in about $20,000 to $25,000 every year. Of course, we'd like to see more. We do contract with someone that pretty much manages those. Given today's economy, it's been kind of hard to find individuals willing to open up their pocketbook. However, we are still aggressive in trying to gain more sponsorships, and we realize that that is a opportunity to increase our revenue and help us break even every year.
thank you. This is still one of those festivals that started when we were incorporated because the community was divided, and this is something that brings our community together every year. So I'm definitely in full support of everything you guys are asking for, and thank you for all you guys do.
Counselor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple questions. One is, under security, is that private security, or does that include the PD? Like, is there a fee that the city?
Thank you for bringing that up. Good point. So that line item there is actually for private security that is augmented to city police staffing. They are at all of the primary entrances to the facility, and they kind of help us enforce the rules with respect to outside food and beverages. We ask that people leave their non-service animal dogs and pets at home, for instance. I would like to mention, and thank you for bringing this up, that the city does provide a significant contribution with respect to PD time, parks time, public works time, with setting up infrastructure to make sure that the parade is safe, and also at the park. And they provide 24-hour security, I believe, overnight every year too. So I think that is a cost to the festival that's not listed specifically here, but I think council should be aware of that, and we appreciate the city's in-kind support.
And then another question, thank you. And then another question I have is, we're getting into we're getting into this data analytics. And is there any way that I see some of the data on tracking the visitors, that kind of stuff. Is there any way to have some deeper understanding of what is working, what is not working, whether it's food or, or rides or something that you can, something that you want to do more of and something you want to do less of? Have you looked at those kinds of things?
Some of the things that we have access to would be, for example, places that individuals frequent either before or after. We've identified a few places, like, for example, I think a large percentage of festival goers like to go to Chick-fil-A. So those would be some location that we would like to target as a sponsor, for instance. We know kind of how far people come from and where the local areas are. So from that perspective, we can identify potential sponsors. As far as what's inside the festival itself, it's kind of hard to get really specific. Like, for example, do people really like Grammys? So we need to hit them up for a special sponsorship, or, how many people go to the carnival and so forth. So I think once you get inside the park, it's hard to tell exactly what's the heaviest or most frequented location or specifics.
Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Miller, for this the presentation really has helped me kind of understand this. I've always been impressed with the scale of Carnation Fest. For a town Wheat Ridge's size, it's impressive. And all the work that goes into it, and it's just, I mean, it's evident when you go there. I did pull the page from last year's budget document on the Carnation Fest, and it shows from the 2024 proposed was 150, and I believe you just said that it was actually 125.
That is correct. We requested 150 and we're appropriated 125.
Got it. And then in looking, comparing lines, the line items all the way down, everything looks like you guys are really on top of keeping a lid on things. But when I got to the bottom, at least comparing the budget document from last year to this year, it looks like your expenses have gone down, or you're projecting going down by about 11,000.
Well, I think what we're trying to do is right-size the budget to what can be appropriated, because last year we got less than we thought we would, so we're trying to reduce them and spend a little bit less on things like, unfortunately, we had to maybe cut the budget for the parade because we did less things there. So we're trying to scope the festival to the budget that's available and still keep a reasonable number. We know that the city has some challenges with funding all its requests, so we're trying to align our budget with what can be appropriated.
So I sense a high level of confidence that you're going to be right on the money this year.
I certainly hope so.
All right, thank you.
Counselor Hulteen.
Thanks, Treasurer. It's good to see you. So quick question. So first of all, I love seeing the data. I'm a data junkie. And so it's interesting to see that distribution over the days. I was actually surprised at how commensurate Friday and Sunday were. But so the question I have for you, so you showed that the contribution you're requesting will be the equivalent of 53% of the overall budget. Is that about the same percentage last year of like the city? What percentage of the overall budget did the city contribute to?
You know, I don't have that number right in front of me. It's a $10,000 increase overall, so I'm not sure on the percentage.
Okay.
But it's similar. It's within like 45 to 50%.
Okay. Unlike Dan, Councilmember Larson, I did not look at last year's, but is the overall budget increasing 10,000, or like what is the overall budget increase year over year?
I would say in that $10,000 number. So we scoped the budget and we reduced it last year in order to meet the contribution of about 10,000, and we more or less had a break-even budget. So just mathematically, that means it's increasing by $10,000.
Okay. Just curious. So the city is basically absorbing the increased cost of it.
We are requesting a $10,000 increase. If they come back and give us a number that's lower, we will make adjustments as the best we can and still put on an amazing festival for our community.
Okay. And just to be clear, I'm very supportive of the Carnation Festival. And Local Works in their budget has a $5,000 increase for their event, and it's one day. So, I mean, it's consistent with that. I was just sort of curious if they're fleshing out. So thank you. That was my only question.
Thank you. Any further questions or discussion? The Carnation Festival is requesting $135,000 from council for support of this year's Carnation Festival. Do we have consensus to approve that? Looks like we do. Good presentation, Mr. Miller. Great to see you. We send our best to Mr. DeMott. So that was okay. Our next presenting group is going to be Local Works. Don't be shy. You may take, yes. We would keep you together, but we think you, yeah, that would be fine too. I was going to say, but we don't want you sharing notes, so. It's more of an open book exam, so come on in. All right. Okay. Paige, introduce yourself and your colleague and take it away.
Excellent. Well, it's louder than anticipated. Apologies. Good evening, everyone. I have with me our board president, Mr. Jeremy Lawfer, and myself, Paige, with Local Works for our 2025 budget request. I'd like to start by saying, it's a very humbling opportunity to be given to present in front of you all. And I'm going to take us through a little bit of a journey as briefly as possible, just in all the change that Local Works has seen over the past several years. I think it's important to set the stage of the work that we've done over the past several years and where we are headed. And specifically, it's going to really center around our new strategic plan that is community, business, and beyond. So that is what our new strategic plan focuses on. And inside your council packet and in the budget request memo that was attached, as well as our most recent audited 990, which was for the year of 2022. You'll be receiving our 2023 990 in about 3 weeks. So great nighttime reading to look forward to. Perfect. So as I mentioned, we're looking to set the stage into what Local Works has done over the past several years to set us up for success as we continue to move forward. And what's important to note is everything that we do centers back on our mission of making Wheat Ridge a more vibrant and sustainable place to live and work. So between 2022 and now, we've done quite a bit of growth and brand new programs that we have launched in the community, and that centers around almost a year and a half of listening to the community. So we took a ton of time to listen to the community. It's been wonderful to speak with you all on council and have your partnership to understand where is Local Works going and why, and really evaluating our programs to understand what do we provide the community and why. And the big theme that came out of this is that Local Works for a long period of time was doing a ton of stuff. And so we decided that quality over quantity was the direction that we were heading. So after listening for, again, about that year and a half time period, we started cutting programs, launching new programs as a test run. I'm very, very impressed with the amazing staff and the board of directors that I have, that we're always willing to fail, because then you learn something. So we've tried a lot of new things to understand why we do and what we do it. So examples of programs that we've cut include things like Fitness on the Green, where that's now being taken over as a volunteer opportunity for other community members, and programs that we've added, which include really revamping Live Local entirely and making it focus more on economic development. So that brings us to the start of the 2024 year, where we adopted this new strategic plan, Community, Business, and Beyond. And we are moving out of our growth phase. We've been going 1 million miles a minute for almost 3 years. And so we are now going to focus on efficiency and effectiveness of all the programs that we have launched, and how can we better those for the community. Oh, it works now. I realize this slide is chaotic. I was trying to make it look like fireworks, and it did not work very well. But this is just a high-level overview of everything that Local Works does in big picture. So if we were to list everything that we do, it'd be the most nauseating slide that you see. So this is high level of what we do. But the big things that I want to focus on, and everything that makes us into that community, business, and beyond, is on this screen. It's important to note that there's 4 pillars that Local Works likes to say that our mission serves, which includes neighborhood revitalization, civic engagement, economic development, and arts and culture. And so these represent some of those. So for example, Local Works continues to do our Building Up Business Loan and Home Improvement Loan program. And we recently launched a micro funding loan program that are smaller loans for things like website relaunches or social media consulting, things that we've heard from businesses that they need that they simply usually can't get loans for. Also on this is the launch of our Block Party Library. So that's a really great tangible example that we listened to the community, we listened to council, and we launched our Block Party Library. 2 other things that I'll note, and then we'll keep moving forward, is Local Works has been on a journey of diversifying our revenue. And so later in the presentation, we'll show details of that. But inside your council memo, it's important to see the work that we've done to fundraise for some of our operating expenses. And on the flip side, this is not really a flip side, but we've seen an overall 300% increase in engagement of Local Works. So a big part of when we listened to folks for almost a year and a half was regaining that trust and almost rebranding ourselves in the community so people know what we do, know what we don't do, and why those choices were made. So we're going to do a quick 2024 year in review to show you where your funds went last year. Our ending dollar amount that we received from the city of Wheat Ridge last year was $329,900. This year's budget request is $200 less than that. But to quickly review 2024, we have launched several things between January and March, including the Explore 44, announced as a new corridor identity. We opened Clear Creek Makerspace, which over 600 people attended the grand opening, and we held 3 Live Local events impacting 65 residents and 3 small businesses. April through June, we have held 1 TLC cleanup day. The Explore 44 bus stop signage was installed. You see a great picture of the amazing Wheat Ridge Public Works team getting those bus signs up. We continue our block party and dumpster grants, and we launched our block party library. 2 Live Local events were held. 83 residents were impacted, along with 2 small businesses. 140 classes have been published on clearcreekmakerspace.com for both members and the public to take inside the space. We held the West 29th Marketplace Block Party. We launched the quarterly business resource meeting. Our Partners in Progress Committee stood up their first event called Housing Hour, which educated the community on what affordable housing is and is not in Wheat Ridge. And that was a great partnership with the city, so thank you, and a big thank you to Lauren Mikulak. We've launched our Summer Shop Wadsworth campaign, and Ridgefest moved to Anderson Park. And we are forecasting that we had about 2,000 people attend that event. And then as we wrap up the year, July through December, so this is forecasting where the rest of your funds from 2024 will go. We will have 3 more TLC cleanup days. Our block party and dumpster grants will continue, and we aim to give 15 block party grants and 15 dumpster grants. 6 more Live Local events are forecasted to be held. Forecast of 100 residents to be impacted, 6 small businesses. We will hold an open house for 44th Avenue businesses to come pick up their physical welcome kit for the Explore 44 corridor, which includes window decals, swag, and then there's digital links to social media kits and things like that. So we're really trying to unite that corridor behind Explore 44 and show them what can come of being a united corridor behind an identity. We will also hold our first Rad Retro Run on 44th Avenue, a 1-mile fun run with a block party at Hopper Hollow Park after to activate the east side of 44th. And we will have our 3rd annual Barstool Bingo fundraising event, which has become a community favorite. So this is just a nice snapshot of, in 2024, where all of those funds will lie in the budget items that you see inside of our budget in your memo. So it's all in between community outreach, business corridors, Live Local, Wheat Ridge Creates, which is a committee that Local Works helps manage with the city of Wheat Ridge, who they are now providing grants, and they are providing portable wall hangers for artists to use when they show their work. So that is the small chunk that you see there with that group. We've got the Makerspace and then Ridgefest. So that shows you the allocation of what we anticipate to end the year of 2024 with your funds. So now the whole reason why we're here, our 2025 request, again, we are requesting that $329,700 for the 2025 year. And again, that's going to center around community business and beyond. So as I mentioned, Local Works has been in the very fast growth phase. And so this list is not all encompassing of everything that we're going to do in 2025 with the funds that we are allocated. This is that optimization that we're looking to make. So I just want to make that clear. In your budget memo, you'll see a much more detailed explanation of where all the funds in 2025 are forecasted to go and why. But a couple optimization items that I'd like to make sure that we cover is we're anticipating that Live Local is going to continue to grow. We've really seen this awesome attrition rate of Live Local, and we used to average about 15 people per event, and now we're averaging 30 to 35. So it's really great to see that increase. So we anticipate to impact 1,600 total residents next year. We are looking to add more diverse waste options to TLC cleanup days. So that includes things like electronic recycling. We're looking at having larger dumpsters for some of the specialty dumpsters that we offer now with increased funds, including larger dumpsters for tires, paint, things that are harder to get rid of that those dumpsters always fill up so quick currently, at TLC cleanup days. We will upgrade the neighborhood block party library, so we'll probably do another community survey to understand what do they love in the library, what are we missing, and have a few upgrades in there, and then have some funds set aside for maintenance of that one day we get the phone call that our bouncy castle has ripped and we have to get a new one. The business block party series will continue, so that is something new that we launched 2 years ago. We held our first business block party at Gold's Marketplace to celebrate that revitalization, and then we moved it over to West 29th Marketplace in early June, and so we'll continue that series. And that's something that into this next year, we're looking for council's partnership on to understand where we should move it, and we're also looking to poll the community. People have come up to us about Clear Creek Crossing, and that might be a really great location for it next year, but we definitely would love to collaborate with council to understand where would you like us to move that business block party, and how can we best serve the community by doing that. We will graduate our second class of Wheat Ridge 102, so we've graduated our first, and we're looking to graduate our second in 2025, and we will continue educational events, specifically by Partners in Progress, similar to Housing Hour. Actually, before the end of this year, Local Works will hold something that's educational for all the ballot measures that are being put on the ballot specific to Wheat Ridge, including education about the Lutheran Legacy Campus and what it means, and other things like that. Again, as a reminder, Local Works does not take positions on these things. We are the educational bridge to make sure the public is informed before they make their decision. And then finally, we'll continue business corridor support. So 44th Avenue is going to be a continued priority in the 2025 budget, specifically getting more branding implemented on the corridor, such as flags on light poles, and other things that may come up as we continue in partnership with the Sub-Area 44 plan, as well as getting attention over to the east side of 44th. That's where our dollars are going to focus, is the east side of 44th in partnership with some of the sub-area plan that includes the branding. It's important to understand just our total financial position. And so this is what I alluded to earlier, which I'll briefly discuss, is the diversification of our funds since 2022. So in 2022, the city of Wheat Ridge was responsible for about 99% of the annual revenue for Local Works. And when I say annual revenue, our operating budget that made it possible for us to operate. And direct public support was at 1%. In 2023, we saw that start to go down. So the city of Wheat Ridge was responsible, and thank you, for about 77.3% of our annual operating budget. Private grants were at 15.7%, and then direct public support is at 6.9%. And to give definitions of private grants and direct public support. So direct public support is donations, and that also now includes Clear Creek Makerspace membership. And private grants are privately funded foundations and grants outside of the city government that we are seeking. In 2024, what's forecasted is the city of Wheat Ridge will very graciously give us about 70% of our annual revenue. Private grants will be about 15%, so we're anticipating that stays about the same. The big change is that direct public support at 15%. Part of that is due to the makerspace now being open, and we have that membership revenue coming in. But part of this is also, we've seen just so much generosity from the community with the work that we do, that we get a lot of donations randomly in the best way. And we've also started a monthly donor program. So we have close to 15 people that donate to us monthly, just because of the work that we do. So we've really tried to diversify our funding sources and understand where those can come from as we continue to grow and move forward. As I'm wrapping up here, I also think it's important to know that, Local Works has had a pretty large reserve for many, many years, and that has been spent down by 40%. So right now, our reserve with cash available is sitting right about $600,000. If Local Works, and you'll see in the budget, it takes us about $545,000, give or take, to operate at the capacity that we are at this point. So that's about a year of reserve if we needed it. So that's a very healthy position for a nonprofit to be at, and it's very fiscally responsible for the nonprofit to be at that point of the reserve. And as you can imagine, that 40% of the reserve went into Clear Creek Makerspace. So I think all of you have had the pleasure to see the building, and it looks, I think, $1 million better. But we spent about $550,000 total dollars between construction and equipment purchases to stand the makerspace up. Finally, this is the last slide, and I know that y'all can read, so I'll let you read, but these are just a few testimonials from business owners and residents who interact with Local Works on a daily basis. And I think the most important thing is, one, I truly want to thank Mayor Starker and Wheat Ridge City Council for the unwavering support you've given us for almost 20 years. We'll be celebrating our 20-year anniversary next year of Wheat Ridge 2020 Inc. And our work isn't possible without you. So just know that your dollars, it's 365 days of impact, and we're asking you to invest in the work that we're doing and continue to be a partner as we continue to grow. So again, thank you so much for your time, and Jeremy and I are happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Paige. Questions from council? Councilor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for being here. So when I was looking through your short narrative, and it breaks it down by budget item, percentage of total budget, and then important measures and metrics and information. In your business quarter revitalization, it's 20.5%. And I see a lot of that is for what you're saying is your new focus, which is Explore 44. However, my concern is that we've spent a lot of money on Ridge 38, and it's very dusty. And in years past, we've been told that we're going to be putting some energy behind that, and I haven't seen that happen. And so I just would like to know what your future plans are for that.
Yes, thank you, Councilor Hoppy. That's a great question. So part of that is the optimization phase. So now that we've stood up Explore 44, we're looking to duplicate that work in corridor management back to Ridge 38. So allocating more time to meet with those business owners, have specific events, and especially planning for the opening of the green and that amphitheater, really taking that as an opportunity to re-engage the corridor beforehand. So we're in a united front to have more events, have more activity. So it's a great point. And we do not plan to spend the whole budget on in the business corridor section on 44th Avenue specifically.
Thank you. Councilor Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this might be a question for kind of Patrick and Paige on this. I thought that Ridge Fest went really well the other day at Anderson Park. Is there a possibility that we look at adding some programming at both Anderson, and then as the green opens, moving maybe Ridge Fest back over there, but maybe doing a Live Local fair or something at Anderson? Because that seemed to just really flow really well with Makerspace, or maybe a Makers Fair or something like that. Has there been any discussions like that with maybe Local Works and Beth or the city at all?
It's a great idea. On the Local Works end, with our current budget ask, we would not have the capacity to have two different locations. So it's something to consider, but at this time, we wouldn't be able to do two different events to the caliber that we saw at Ridge Fest a couple weeks ago.
Well, I think one of the things I really like about what your board and you guys have done as a staff is you don't seem to treat Local Works like a nonprofit, like a city arm. You treat it like a business. And the things that you do are very entrepreneurial, and you guys are launching programs, and if they don't work, you move on. And the things that you do, you reach out to the community and you make them better. So I really love what you guys are doing. I think that the other day, though, really kind of struck that maybe we can start doing a little bit more between the two. And as you talk about corridor management, having 38th have its own identity, having 44th have its own identity, and having programming for both of those as we move forward as a city and as Local Works, maybe adding to what we're looking at over the next couple of years would be great. But thank you to Local Works and all you guys are doing. You're doing a fantastic job.
Councilor Larson, did you have a?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, go
Mayor.
ahead.
And I'd like to, I totally agree with what Mayor Pro Tem Stites has said about the way the Local Works has operated. It's just all through the documentation here, it reflects a lot of thought and a lot of work that went into providing as much information as the council will need. I did have a question on the operating expense section of the request. In there, you talk about Makerspace, and it's from 2024 to 2025, the amount of expense connected with Makerspace decreases by a lot. Of the 2024 funds that were spent, how much would be considered capital expense versus operating?
I was gonna say that might be a good question for you to take if you want to. Okay. 90%, give or take, of that number is capital expense, between the initial investment of the equipment and then the renovation. The expense that you see in the 2025 budget, and I'm glad that you brought this up, Counselor Larson, is we received a grant. A huge thank you to the city of Wheat Ridge for, and your partnership in applying for some congressionally spending dollars, of $200,000, and we need to expend the $100,000, part of that, on equipment. We were unsure if we could be in a place that they could like already pay for part of the equipment that we've already bought. So moving forward, you're not going to see as high of an expense even after 2025. 2025 is rather large still for the makerspace. Give or take, it takes about $60,000 right now to operate it per year if we just stayed the same.
Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Snell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for this presentation. This is good information, lots of good stuff. A question, and it's just good timing. Counselor Larson asked a question, and I'll just piggyback on that. Thinking about the makerspace and thinking about the expensive equipment that's in there, and then how our community is interacting and how folks are getting in there and creating things, how do you handle, this is kind of a multi-part question. Number one, how do you handle if someone wants something, or if there's many requests for a new piece of equipment, how is that handled? And then how also do you have, I know that you probably have a certain budget for repairs and things like that. How are those handled?
Thank you, Counselor Snell. Both great questions. So the first with how we take requests, we have a formal request feedback from members that when it gets enough votes and it gets enough attention, it goes to our advisory board. So important to note that Clear Creek Makerspace has an advisory board, and we have a board liaison from our board of directors that serves on that. So they're operating somewhat independently, and the Local Works Board of Directors is not controlling all the nuances with the makerspace. So feedback request form for folks that come to our open houses or just hear about the makerspace in the community, we're regularly taking data of understanding this has been asked for quite a bit and this hasn't. So there's two different ways that we see it, through members and then the public. And then your second question, remind me, was around repairs. Thank you. We do have a maintenance budget right now. Because we've been open for 3 months, we are doing our best to forecast what that looks like after seeing some of the wear and tear 6 to 8 months down the road. But give or take $10,000 to $12,000 a year, we're anticipating for maintenance of current equipment.
Thank you. Counselor Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. It was wonderfully done. I really appreciate you highlighting the diversification of funding. You really took the feedback from council over the last several years, and that, we wanted to know how you would become more self-sustaining and rely on funding revenue other than the city. And I think you've done a phenomenal job, and really appreciate the Clear Creek Makerspace and that amenity in our community. I think it's a wonderful addition. And my family and I attended the Ridge Fest at Anderson Park, which of course I'm biased towards Anderson Park because it's within walking distance of my house. And so really, really loved the event. And so my question is more surrounding that as far as like demographic tracking. If you have similar kind of data around Ridge Fest that, the Carnation Festival provided, and if it's something that we look at moving forward of, that separate identity from 44th and 38th, with the Clear Creek Makerspace being basically located at Anderson Park, I'm sure it's a lot easier for you to manage an event that coincides with the Clear Creek Makerspace and connects the two of them with Ridge Fest and kind of a Makers Fair. And so it seemed like pretty opportune timing for this year, having to move it to Anderson because of the green renovation and the Clear Creek Makerspace opening. I wonder, obviously the event has grown year after year, but did you see a really significant shift with it being located at Anderson versus the green?
Yeah, great. And I think I heard two questions, Counselor Dozeman. One about the data. So we do have some of that data. The average stay at Ridge Fest this past year was 93 minutes. 43% of our attendees were from Wheat Ridge, and then the rest were from surrounding areas. So that was actually a surprising data point for us to see that we are drawing other folks into the community through Ridgefest. And when it comes to the event at Anderson Park, I agree it was a wonderful opportunity logistically for us to move stuff 50 feet instead of driving it to the green was also great. But it did pull a different crowd. It was a different demographic than what I've seen in my time with Local Works and Ridgefest, and the flow worked extremely well. The flow was just extremely conducive to how the event just ran from an attendee experience. But we are very excited to hold events on the green, and Patrick and his staff have been great in keeping us involved in the planning process. So we've actually had a voice in understanding what do we need out of the new amphitheater. So we're really excited for that opportunity to bring it back there. But I will say it was a huge success at Anderson Park, and we wouldn't say no to hosting it there again.
Thank you. Counselor Ohm.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Paige and Jeremy. Thank you, Local Works. Couple questions I have, and first up, I just want to say I've been really impressed this past year. Over the couple years, I've seen different council members and community ask for things, and I feel like Local Works has stepped up. And this was a lot of trust and faith, about the makerspace, and that was a big monument to overcome, and I feel like Local Works has done that. But one question I did want to ask is that as we kind of look at the data and the numbers, to kind of compare apples to apples, over the years, has the services other than the makerspace been consistent, or are you adding additional services but still trying to keep the same? I'm just kind of wondering, like, are you having more things that you're taking on responsibility that Local Works is, but you're still keeping it at that same, not necessarily adjusted for inflation number?
Thank you, Counselor Ohm. That's a great question. The answer is yes, we are adding things. So quick examples include like the block party library, and there's just logistics behind that and investment behind that. The business block party series as well, we're not accounting for potential increased costs. Similar to Treasurer Miller, we understand that this entire city budget is tough to complete. And so we are trying to continue to be nimble and a partner to understand like what are the true funds that we need. You might have seen in the budget that I presented that Local Works is anticipating a $25,000 deficit for the 2025 year. So that's something that, if the city believes in our work, we're going to, ask for you to consider a full investment to make us whole so we can slow down a little bit on taking money out of our reserves. But we are continuing to grow and increase programming regardless of the dollar amount at this point because of the diversification of revenue that Local Works has seen. So we're investing our own dollars in our mission. And we think that is allowing us to be a better capable partner with you, and that we're not just asking the city to invest in us, but we're also investing in ourselves.
Counselor Hulteen.
Thank you. I'm sitting here thinking back to previous budget presentations from Local Works and sometimes the tension in the room around that. And I just want to really acknowledge that what you've brought to us today is really demonstrative of, not just trust, but that you said 3 years ago what you were going to do and you've delivered on that. And I think that that feels like the kind of partnership that, we as a city and then we as citizens can really feel good about. And I just want to acknowledge you and your board and your staff for that accomplishment, because there was definitely some work to do in that space. And so I think for me, when I look at this and I think about the trajectory, and I really appreciated the framing of like this, like explosive, like try things, fail, and you've done really well with that. And I also appreciate that transitioning into a different phase is where we are, so that our expectations are in line with the capacity and priorities of Local Works. So I appreciate that communication. I think a couple of things I think about that feel really important. When I first got involved with Local Works, then Wheat Ridge 2020, it was really transitioning from this like housing and sort of like moving the city forward from like a really policy partnership standpoint to this real community forward leaning into community need. And at the time, I was just like, why are we in this bank building? And what I feel like in 2024, Local Works has brick and mortar street facing presence in our community for the first time. And I think that that makes a huge difference because Local Works isn't just a thing that the city knows as a partner, but like our community experiences as direct community benefit. And as we are likely facing a tighter budget, it's increasingly important that those dollars translate to community benefit. So I really love that. And then I just have to thank you for the block party kit. I know that was something we had talked about. Arvada did that years ago. And as someone who started and hosts the block party in my neighborhood, the civic fabric that has come out of that it shows up, everywhere from like my neighbor's wife unexpectedly died about a month ago. And we had a network of people who like were just on it and like, checking in on him, bringing him food because we all know each other. To, I am getting harassed right now because it's time to start planning the block party and everyone's bringing their ideas and now it's a lot of kids. And so I think when I think about what makes Wheat Ridge great, it's those relationships. And so I just really want to thank you and of course have my enthusiastic support, but I'm excited where we are today, but I really am excited about the trajectory, especially with the brick and mortar. And then the last thing, I'm just going to remind you all, we are investing a lot of money in the green and I'm glad we all liked it at Anderson Park, but we just designed an entire half block around hosting events in partnership with Local Works. So I'm going to just, let's keep that in mind that we have an amazing place coming online that was designed specifically around events like Local Works hosts. So just let's not stay off too far off topic with that because I want to see the green heavily activated. So anyway, congratulations to you with a lot of gratitude.
Well, thank you all. Great questions. Paige, thank you for a great presentation. We have a request from Local Works for a budget request of $329,700 in this budget. Do we have consensus to bring that forward in the budget process? Looks like we do. Thank you very much. Great presentation. Great work. Tell me, what is the Block Party Library?
It's free for Wheat Ridge residents, that they can check out things like 10 by 10 tents, 6-foot tables, chairs, bouncy castle, bubble machine,
Oh, okay. So this is
inflatable
not-
movie screen, speakers, it's all the fun in a box.
Oh, so this is not just it's not just books about how to have a.
Correct, it's like a fun library, yeah.
Thank you very much. That very illuminating. So, thank you very much. Okay. With that, we have completed agenda item number 1. So now we will go to agenda item number 2. This is the Community Partners Grant Program Committee 2025 budget recommendations. I believe we have Cole Haslip here and some colleagues from the committee. So welcome. Thank you all for being here. No side chatter. You just make the push it and the green button goes on.
Hi, my
You're
name's
good.
Stephanie Tanner, and this is my fellow committee member Rio O'Neill, and we will be presenting on the committee's recommendations today. So the Community Partners Grant Program Committee, I'll refer to it as CPGP going forward. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Try it. 1 second. Yeah, should work.
All right, the agenda for our presentation. We'll give a quick overview of the CPGP. We'll introduce the 2024 committee members, talk about the applications and the requests, the evaluation process, then our recommendations, and we'll leave time for questions. So the CPGP overview, mission, the CPGP supports nonprofit agencies and programs that serve Wheat Ridge. This is the 17th year of the CPGP. Since 2020, the program has awarded over $750,000 to several agencies and programs that serve or are in Wheat Ridge. And the program is growing in applicants, community interest, and competitiveness. And our 2024 committee members include Geneva Fox, Jeffrey Richards, Lindsay Schwerman, myself, Stephanie Tanner, Alexander Goldsmith, and Rio O'Neill. And I'll pass it on to him for the next few slides.
Cool. Thank you, Stephanie. So this chart here depicts the amount of applications that we've received over the past 4 years or 5 years for the different funding rounds. There's been steady growth, but this year in particular was special because we vastly surpassed all prior years in award requests, which is an indication that awareness of the program is growing and folks are sending really good applications in increasing numbers. Accordingly, the amount of dollars requested has increased on pace with this. $524,000 represents this funding round's total requests received. Pretty big jump from 2024. Keep in mind, our allocation for this program was $200,000. So the amount of funds that we had to work with and distribute between applicants represented about 38% of what we had to work with. So as you can imagine, some difficult conversations and decisions had to be made around the applications. I could tell you now a little bit about our evaluation process. So all of us as community members individually read the applications that we received from the applicants. Also, all applicants were provided the opportunity to deliver a 17-minute presentation to us over Teams. So we got to watch a lot of really good application presentations. With that, between the oral presentation and the application, we were able to score them on a number of different criteria, such as whether they demonstrated there was a community need that they were being responsive to. We asked them to provide the number of Wheat Ridge residents that they estimated serving either in the past or projected. Also, if they tracked it, to what extent they benefited the quality of life or the health, safety, and welfare of our residents. And we also took a look at their data collection and usage, specifically through a performance measurement lens to see if they were tracking what they were doing and able to demonstrate that it did have an impact. So with all of that work, there were 43 applications that we received that we had to review. We all combined our scores, aggregated them, and then as a committee, we came together and discussed why we wanted to give the scores that we did. And then, like I said, had some tough conversations around the scoring and funding recommendations. However, I'd say we did pretty well. Out of the 43 applications that we received, we were able to award funding to 39 of the applicants. Awards hovered around the $4,500 mark. Wouldn't go much higher than $10,000 if they did. And at this point, the next step is for applicants to be contacted by Cole and given specific feedback that we compiled as a committee. So they'll understand what they could do better next year. Also help them with any other applications they may be applying to elsewhere. We're asked to provide our thoughts on this experience. I'd say it's my first time participating on this. It's been a lot of fun. I wanted to get more involved with local government and get an understanding of how that works. So this was a great opportunity to do that.
And this is my second year on the committee, and it's been really interesting to see the growth of the applications that have been coming in. And I also really get excited learning about the agencies that want to serve Wheat Ridge or who are in Wheat Ridge, and just kind of see how they want to help our residents.
With that, we will open up for any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions from council? Councilor Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for giving your time to this process as well as the presentation. And I really appreciated you reviewing the criteria. Can you maybe indicate like if there was a prioritization of that criteria as far as like the number of residents that directly benefit from various organizations, or if there was a specific focus on programs, for mental health or food insecurity, or can you maybe speak to that a little bit?
So each application was scored using a similar rubric based on the criteria that Rio mentioned. The scores were from 1 to 10. So if they served more Wheat Ridge residents, in theory, they would have received a higher number on that scoring metric. Similar with the quality of life, outcome measures, things like that. As far as a priority, we scored them all the same. So I would say that no, but if you want to add to that.
One thing to add, though, we did go over a pretty exhaustive list of the evaluation criteria that we used. Other factors were at hand that we considered as well. So we looked at their budgets and their proposed expenditures to see if they were reasonable. We also assessed how much juice was with the squeeze, as far as what they were requesting. We tracked as well what percentage the requests constitute of their total budgets. So if there were opportunities to provide a higher impact grant that accounted for 60% of their operating budget, then we would try to take those opportunities if they were within reason.
And so these organizations, like some are in Jeffco, many are in Wheat Ridge, but several are also out of like Denver, Arvada. Could they demonstrate pretty, easily that they serve a significant population in Wheat Ridge, and that the funding that we as a city, our tax resident base, would be giving to benefit our own community?
Yeah, so one of the things that a lot of us asked in our follow-ups to the presentations was, will this money, if awarded, be earmarked for the population that you serve in Wheat Ridge? How is that tracked? Things like that.
Counselor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you so much for your time. I have kind of a simple question. It sounds like you guys have had a great experience in this process, and for those listening and that are curious about it, how much time roughly have you guys put into this? Because I don't want to minimize that. I want to have an understanding of like how much time did it take to go through this?
We had, correct me if I'm wrong, Cole, 5 presentation nights that were about 2.5 hours each.
Wow.
And then we had our deliberation meeting, which is about the same. And then I know I took about an hour to an hour and a half before each presentation night to read through all the applications that were upcoming. So 5 plus 5 plus 5, yeah.
A lot of work.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Counselor Hulteen.
I will pile on the gratitude. I know that this particular service to our city is a big time commitment, and I really appreciate you doing that. Of course, we all have, we look at it and we all have our favorites on there. But I think one of the things I really appreciate is that, this is done in such a thoughtful, deliberative manner. But as somebody who spends a lot of time in the grant space, I've been on national grant review committees. I've been on a lot of grant review committees. And so a question I have that I guess doesn't tie directly to your recommendations, but I'd find myself wondering if there's things that we could do given the growth of applications that we're getting, and it's getting more competitive. When we first started doing this, the amount we were giving out was closer to 100,000. So we're giving out more money. So I would be curious about exploring, what are ways that we could actually make this process a little bit more efficient for both you and our grantee, right? Like, because those grantee things. And so I know it's not what we're here to talk about tonight, but I would be interested, we are the trustees of those funds. And so I would like to propose that council actually, before we embark on the next cycle, revisit how we go about doing this. And it could be everything from getting initial letters of interest that you review and then you invite for full applications, so you're not going through so many 17-minute. I would say if I were on one committee, it would be on this one, because it is really cool to hear that. So, that could be a possible efficiency. Some of the criteria, do we shave off some criteria to make it more focused? So maybe not something that we have to explore here tonight, but I would like to get support from my peers for us to take that to a study session to talk about this process so that it's a good use of your time and we're able to strategically like get those dollars to our community. And then the one thing that, if it's possible with the grantees, I mean, 39 is a lot. But the thing that I keep thinking about every year when this comes up to us is that these are really interesting. I mean, there's organizations I'm learning about here that are having impact in the community that I represent and serve. It would be really great if each of the grantee could put together just a one-pager, who they are, what they're doing with the money. Like, just really simple. I don't want to, it's something that's already in what they've provided us, but if we could have a packet that we could put on our website that is very simplified, not just the organization and the amount, but rather just ask them for like a one-page summary of like who they are, the impact they're having, and what those dollars are going to go towards. I think that's really good information for our community because we have a lot of invisible work in our community. So if that's something we could ask as part of giving them money, I think that would be really great to have that cataloged. Otherwise, really seriously, thank you for that. And we hope we make it easier for those who will be serving again next year. So thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Hoppe.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you so much for your time and your investment in this committee. This started as a committee with, I believe Mary Ann initially started it as something to get our community involved and invested in how we do our budget processes. And I know that when I very much enjoy supporting the nonprofits that I personally support. Also, it is hard at the end of the year, like during Colorado Gives Day, to like say, okay, well, this is my budget and these are the things I want to support. I know that it feels good to give the money away, but then it's hard to make those decisions. So I appreciate you guys putting forth such a great process to do that. I agree with Councilwoman Hulteen that we should maybe be looking at how do we, so for a very long time, it was how do we get the word out? And so now that the word is out there, it's how do we make sure that we're dialing into the programs that we want to make sure are getting supported. Oftentimes, you know, maybe some of the smaller programs that don't really have as much opportunity or as much administration behind them to help them do the fundraising, like that kind of stuff. And so I agree that we should be looking at those and potentially adding some different criteria to that. But for the work that you guys did for this year, I very much appreciate that. Hopefully we'll have something a little cleaner for you to be looking at next year.
Thank you. Counselor Larson.
Yeah, I'll be as brief as I can here. Again, you guys did a tremendous job pulling this stuff together. And the first question is, would you help us understand the sort of the application timeline? When does it start? When are applications due? When do the applicants find out?
If we could defer to Cole, we're only involved once the applications have come in and been reviewed by staff, so.
Yeah, happy to address that question. Thank you, Councilor Larson. So last year was a little bit different. The way we did it this year, though, was we released the, well, let me back up. Before we even released the application for folks to apply to, we kind of put the word out there. We had an initial webinar meeting to try and inform potential applicants of the entire timeline for the process and what was involved. And that took place in February of this year. Then we released the application on March 1st of this year. It closed on April 26th. And then in June is when we had the presentation meetings where each of those applicants presented to the CPGP committee. Like they said, they had a deliberation meeting afterward, and then here we are tonight. What happens after this, I think, is a good question after that, too. So after tonight, I will provide an opportunity for all the applicants to have a feedback meeting afterward. Later on, the recommendations are incorporated into the city budget, and that's when they're actually approved, is when the city council adopts the full budget. Once that budget is adopted, we inform the applicants that their awards are finalized, and then in January, we start the contracting process with them. So something new that we implemented for the first time for the 2024 year was a contract where they agree to certain terms and conditions. There's stipulations that they have to spend all the money within the grant year, and other things that are really important to make sure that we have a quality grant program. So we'll do that in January of this next year, and then we'll give the money out to the applicants in February of 2025. They'll then have all of 2025 to spend that money, and then in January 2026, they'll be required to submit a final report, which tells us exactly what they did with the money, and talks about some of the challenges that they faced as well, and how they're looking to improve and things like that. So that's your kind of overview of the entire grant cycle.
Thank you, Cole, and it certainly is a thorough process, and I can appreciate the amount of work that goes into it. I did have, as I reviewed the applicants and what they were requesting the money for, I was very impressed with the majority of the organizations are looking to provide support to the community, and these are direct needs and fairly immediate as well, and programs are in place. The concern that I have is that there are organizations that provide services, but they also advocate. And in my experience in dealing with nonprofits, when you bring advocacy into a nonprofit, it does change sort of the mission. And so I guess going forward, I wouldn't be able to support an organization that is in the advocacy business as opposed to providing a service or program.
Thank you. Councilor Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you. I think the component of giving feedback to the applicants and maybe what it is that they could do better, or ways in which they could demonstrate, a benefit to the Wheat Ridge community is extremely helpful. So I appreciate that piece, and I also appreciate the refinement process. I think that that's going to be a significant portion of this moving forward. If we're planning on giving multiple organizations funding that, many are outside of Wheat Ridge. And if they can demonstrate that they're providing services and programs to the Wheat Ridge community, that's one thing. But really this intention was to give back to community organizations within Wheat Ridge, and that directly benefit our citizens. And so I think the one pager to provide for the community is a great idea, just giving information of, okay, like what it is that we're supporting with this funding, and even, that final report in which how they spent that money, that may be beneficial for us on council to see as well, particularly for some of these organizations that come back year after year to request funding. And I did have a couple of specific questions. So, and this will probably be a part of the conversation and refinement of the process and the criteria, but to what extent is a portion of the funding to organizations that may already receive funding within our budget or have significant partnerships and receive funding from the city? So, we partner extensively with Family Tree, Foothills Regional Housing, Jefferson Center for Mental Health, and they have other line item budgets each year, and then they also apply for this community grant program. And so, there have been concerns among other council members that express like double dipping. And if there's different programs and initiatives that they're supporting, then that's understandable. But seeing like, okay, they're receiving this funding mechanism and subsidy from the city while also receiving this grant program. And to that, something that I did notice, like, so Colorado Youth for a Change is an organization that applied, and they're receiving $8,000, but it's specific to a reading program at Stevens Elementary. And then Stevens Elementary also applied for their Wheat Ridge Friends of Stevens, which is their PTA, PTSA, and they're receiving $7,500. So that's essentially like one school in our community receiving $15,500. And in that same breath, like we have a lot of Wheat Ridge High School organizations that I believe are operating under separate like booster clubs and nonprofits. And so kind of taking into consideration, having one organization apply through multiple streams of that nature. Jefferson County, is on here several times for various programs. And I appreciate and support Councilmember Larson's decision and would also prefer not to give to organizations that have a significant advocacy piece, and that it be more programmatic giving, and that we can directly see the benefit to residents of our community. And particularly for those that are smaller organizations that provide services or amenities in our community that are really important. And so I also had a specific question in regards to the Wheat Ridge Grange and the Wheat Ridge Coalition for Education. Both of them were new applicants this year that didn't receive funding last year, at least. And neither of them were awarded any funds. And so I just wanted to know what kind of thoughts went into that as well, as to why they didn't receive any funding, because they are, Wheat Ridge based organizations that serve the Wheat Ridge community, and they're some of the only ones, I think other than Cross Purpose, that didn't receive money.
I can say just to start that Bayard Enterprises and Wheat Ridge Grange applied, but they did not make their presentation slot. So because of that, those two agencies did not get recommended for funding. As far as the Coalition for Education, I'll have to read through this. I honestly don't remember that exact conversation, so if you do, Rio, go for it.
And while Stephanie's looking, I'll just reiterate that it was a lot of hard decisions that had to be made with not very limited, but limited in respect to the amount of applications received. One other thing that we considered, in addition to the criteria, in addition to their impact on their budget, was potential duplication of services and how much overlap we'd see with similar organizations. I do believe there was one other organization that had a similar request to that organization. And with that, we felt that we could shift the dollars elsewhere to have higher impact and not necessarily be duplicating what another organization is receiving funds for.
Yeah, and one conversation we had in our deliberation meeting was to your very point of multiple groups within the same entity. So Wheat Ridge High School applying for different pots of money, but to essentially do very similar things. And that duplication of efforts was definitely a component of, well, did we already fund a group that does something very similar in the same place? And if so, let's give it to them. And, it was a difficult conversation, but yeah, that was considered as well.
Thank you. Councilor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is a conversation we can have more in depth when we bring this back for future criteria, but I would just like to caution against the word not funding people who advocate for things, because Jefferson Center for Mental Health advocates for good mental health. Family Tree advocates for the homeless. So there's a whole piece of advocacy in many of these on the list. And so I would just be really careful with the language and the definition around that.
Councilor Hulteen.
Yeah, I'll just be quick with this. I think on that note, I think there's also a difference between when the funding is going towards an organization that has staff that is doing advocacy work, just ensuring that the funds are actually going towards the community programming benefit. And I think it sounds like in your review of these, the dollars here are not going into some general fund, that they're actually getting attached to a program that is community benefit. So we're not talking about funding advocacy. We're talking about funding community programming work. And I think, to Councilmember Hoppy's point, if you go through this list, a lot of these organizations do advocacy. It's part of, it's hard to do community benefit without also doing advocacy. So thank you.
Seeing no more questions, Stephanie and Rio, thank you very much for a great presentation. I was, when someone asked how much time did it take, I started to do the calculation, 17 minutes times 47 or 46 applicants. I thought that's a lot, but it's a lot of work what you do and a lot of detail. Councilors, the CPGP program is requesting $200,000 in the budget for their funding for 2025. Do we have consensus to move this forward? We do. Thank you very much for for being here tonight and for the work that you've done. Your residents appreciate it so much. Thank you. Okay. We are now going to go to agenda item number 3. This is a discussion of the Lutheran Legacy Campus city-initiated rezoning. We'll give it just a second for our next
Yeah.
team to come up. Is everybody okay to push forward with this next presentation before we take a break? I'm sure they're going to be right on point, so it won't be a long presentation. It's an observation. There's no pressure she can't handle, I'm sure.
I don't have an intro. We'll go right into it.
Okay.
We know, you know, Scott and Lauren.
Seen Scott before.
Maybe a quick intro. Tonight, we're just trying to lay out a framework for the Lutheran Legacy Campus zoning that we are going to recommend. We're not looking for final decisions this evening, but just some consensus to move forward, and then we'll bring final ordinances back to council in the future. But we do have a couple of policy questions we're looking for some consensus on this evening. But with that, we'll turn it over to Lauren.
Thank you for buying me a couple minutes. Yes, for the record, Lauren McClack, Community Development Director. I'm here with Scott. You know, us from the Planning Division. We're actually representing a much bigger team that's been working on this for the last couple months. So not here, but listening in and certainly dedicating time is our other planning and zoning experts, Stephanie Stevens, Elena Olivas-Luera, and our planning manager, Jana Easley. We'll be roping in Mr. Dahl here soon, shortly, dependent on your direction tonight. We know we gave you a lot to preview and digest in that agenda packet, and so tonight our presentation will be pretty high level, focused on some of the big takeaways. I want to share where we are in the process, how we're translating the master plan into zoning regulations, and then talk about some of our key topics and questions. Oh, I forgot to advance the slides. What I just shared. We have a few questions in the memo. We're going to save those all to the end, just sort of lumped together in case that's easier. And what we're really looking for tonight, as Patrick mentioned, is the green light to keep drafting the zoning regulations in the spirit of the master plan and the framework that you've got tonight. This slide is getting more and more abbreviated each time we come to you recently to talk about the history. So again, if our viewing audience is just joining us with this project, we've got a lot more on whatsupwheatridge.com. But as a reminder, our planning efforts on this campus date back almost 4 years now. And as I was thinking about it, we actually have a history of being very proactive about this important property. In 2020, we as a city asked the hospital not to sell the campus so we could make a community-created plan. We did that in 2021. We adopted it. Fast forward 3 years, and we talked in April about the pros and cons of being, again, pretty proactive with the charter and the zoning. So as a very brief reminder, the 3 reasons why we are moving forward with the legislative zone change at this stage. First, it allows a very public conversation. We've gotten the chance to talk to the community a lot since we saw you in April, and we can talk about it here tonight. This wouldn't be happening if we were responding to a developer-submitted zoning proposal. Second, we think that no one knows this master plan better than this community and this council and this staff, and that we are best able to align the zoning regulations to the master plan, and we hope you are recognizing that alignment as you're reviewing documents tonight and in the forthcoming meetings. And then certainly number 3, I'm personally concerned, I think it's shared, that on August 4th, the day after that hospital moves, that campus will become increasingly underutilized for some time, and we are trying really hard to minimize that amount of time that it's too important to sort of sit and wait for investment and become an eyesore. And we do think that this rezoning and this legislative zoning could help shorten that to a matter of months and years instead of years and decades. So to that end, I want to share a little bit more about how you translate master plans into zoning. We included in your packet another copy of the master plan. Looked a little different this time, partly for reference, but also partly because we very transparently want to share with the community the breadcrumbs of how you take public input and recommendations and make that into rules. So you saw a lot of highlighting, some red lines, there's some illegible thumbnails on the screen to that end. We have combed through this plan. We have had many eyes comb through this plan to make sure we're not sort of missing any of the bits that came through that public planning process. Throughout the memo, hopefully you saw the page numbers and provisions that we're referencing. If you think we've missed something, please let us know. This is the time where we really want to make sure that the proposed zoning is informed by that master plan. We think it is. That's actually how it's supposed to be. I know you've seen this image a lot, but it's from a nerdy planning standpoint, this is playing out at the Lutheran campus, like textbook 1, 2, 3, how planning and zoning are supposed to inform each other. So the community articulated a vision, council has adopted that vision. Zoning, as you've heard me say, is the set of rules that explains what you can do with your property and what it can look like. We are here at this stage today, actively translating that vision into zoning rules, and those rules will result in the built environment that we originally envisioned. It's not a short process. I added those little red bubbles. This will take 10 to 15 years from sort of start to finish. The city, as you know, is not buying this campus. So in addition to the 1, 2, 3 of vision, zoning, and building, takes time and money and a potential buyer, a new property buyer. But it is fairly linear in the end. And we're hoping that everyone can sort of connect those dots and see those dots being connected over the next 5 to 10 years. You've seen this image as well, but it bears repeating because it is sort of the central tenet of the master plan, and hopefully you continue to see all these regulations being reflected. Number one, the master plan said protect the perimeter. So Scott will talk about the rules we're proposing to that end. Number two, integrate existing assets. We've written some draft approaches related to the chapel, the blue house, and even the existing tree canopy. And then number three, in turn, we can afford more flexibility in the middle. In terms of use and height. So in other words, I think it was Mayor Pro Tem Stites who said just push the buildings in and up, and that's how we achieve the lower densities and the open space on the edge that people want to see. I want to talk about one more topic and then I'll hand it over to Scott. I want to talk about height, maximum building height, because it's the one zoning standard we are not trying to solve tonight. So I will tell you what we know and when we plan to come back specifically to talk about that. The current hospital is 91 feet. I think we might have finally found the drawings for that since we saw you last. So confirmed for sure, 91 feet. You know the city charter limits the height of new structures to be significantly shorter than that. We know a ballot question and a charter amendment would be needed to allow that taller height. The master plan fundamentally calls for height to be tapered. So taller in the middle, shorter as it goes out to the edge. That's what's depicted in the graphic here on the screen, and that was included in your packet. Throughout the summer and when we were doing polling in May, we talked a lot to the community about new structures being less than the existing hospital. And that's what this image shows. 90 feet is technically less than the existing hospital. That's about 7 stories. Based on our public engagement, we think that we need to be more specific than just less than the existing hospital. So we are actively analyzing what should that maximum height be. Is it 7 stories? Is it 6? Is it 5? We will start a second round of public polling potentially tomorrow, certainly this week, and we will be continuing to reach out to potential buyers. So the important takeaway for today is that zoning will require the heights to be tapered. On August 5th, we'll have a study session and we will make a recommendation and ask for a decision on what exactly that maximum height would be. What we do know is the more restrictive edge, which I think was sort of the number one thing that the community wanted to talk about. So we'll go there next.
Thanks, Lauren. And yeah, the framework talks about a bunch of items, but we're going to focus on 3 or 4 key items from that report and then ask you some questions as well. But yeah, to talk through the edge of the campus, we're calling that the low density overlay. That is created in order to ensure that the perimeter serves as a buffer in transition between the campus and the existing adjacent neighborhoods. So we're proposing this low-density overlay as part of the zoning around the perimeter of the site adjacent to low-density neighborhoods. So that would include the west side along Dudley, kind of the south portion of the campus, and then also the east side as well. It would apply to the first row of development within the campus, and that'll ensure both compatibility of land uses and also building form. Although city code allows for 35-foot height limits for residential, including the zoning immediately adjacent to this property, we're actually proposing a shorter limit of 2.5 stories and 30 feet in this overlay to be more compatible with the actual existing conditions on the ground. And also limiting uses within the low density overlay to just be single unit homes, duplexes, accessory buildings, and open space. And this ensures that more medium density uses such as townhomes would not immediately border existing neighborhoods. And another component of this low density overlay that we're proposing is a requirement for pitched roofs to ensure that a large flat roof building over 2 stories could not get built in this area. And those images on the screen are just examples of that 2.5 story requirement. That's actually very similar to Denver's requirement. They don't allow 3-story homes at all. And so these are just some examples. One of the other components that the master plan included a lot of guidance on for us was open space and landscaping, providing a range of amenities throughout the campus. Oh. I clicked it here and not there. A range of amenities throughout the campus. The plan had a lot of specifics about things that any sort of future zoning requirements would have to take into account. And so we're proposing a more regional approach to open space. Right now, our city code really focuses on what you need to do for your individual building, but it doesn't really take a more regional campus planning approach to open space, parks, things like that. So the zoning requirements will include a regional approach to open space, meaning that open space is aggregated throughout each zone within the site, and that a range of public amenities throughout the site are required. And specifically, this would include the requirement for public open space on Dudley Street. We've heard that from the community. That's also included in the plan, with some bike and pedestrian connections into the campus, maybe a pocket park along Dudley Street. Taking a regional approach also means looking at stormwater from a regional perspective. So instead of having every individual building or development build their own detention pond and infrastructure, we're kind of sharing that on a campus-wide basis with some enhanced design requirements as well, integrating natural features. That was an important part of the plan. And coordination will also be required with the Rocky Mountain Ditch Company with the goal of being able to retain a trail or some sort of amenity along the edge of the ditch. Ultimately, the ditch company does control what happens within their easement, but we could still have something maybe outside of the easement if they're not willing to play ball. And lastly, open space and parks and plazas will need to be dispersed throughout the site. So now we're going to get into some of the questions we have for you all. Like Lauren said, we'll go through all the questions one by one and then actually discuss everything at the end. The first one is the existing assets question. So you see the chapel and the blue house on the screen. The master plan laid out a lot of requirements that can be more easily translated into zoning, but there are some topics that were not covered within the master plan, or the direction provided in the plan was not specific enough to translate into actual zoning requirements. And one of those topics is related to the preservation of existing buildings identified as having historic value. So that's the blue house, the chapel, and the TB tent as well. Those were all identified through the master planning process. And then in 2022, council adopted a resolution that requested a future buyer demonstrate a good faith effort in exploring meaningful preservation, rehabilitation, and or reuse of the buildings. We've also continued to hear from the community the desire for preserving those buildings in some form. And so because of this, we're recommending that as part of the concept plan application, which is really early on in the development process, it's the first step that a developer would take to actually develop the campus. The developer must provide justification as to how they intend to comply with that intent of the master plan and also the city council resolution. And approval of the concept plan would then bind the developer to that commitment. Future site plan reviews would need to show some way that those structures are being rehabilitated or incorporated into the new development. And this is the city's way of ensuring that those assets are addressed in some way because they're not officially designated on local, state, or national historic registers. So one of the questions we'll get to at the end is whether council agrees with that approach. The master plan also included information on the viability of certain uses within the campus, and it included heat maps. So a few of those are shown on this slide, but it didn't really get very detailed when considering specific commercial uses. So right now, our current mixed-use code allows for a wide range of uses, and some of those are auto-oriented uses. We're proposing to base a lot of the requirements of the mixed-use Lutheran Legacy Campus zoning on our current mixed-use requirements that are working well. But the only thing related to auto-related uses in the master plan was a section that says that retail and food uses should not solely cater to vehicle traffic on 38th Avenue. There's not a lot of direction in the master plan. And we believe that auto-oriented uses like drive-throughs, gas stations, car washes, auto sales are really counter to the goals and intent of the master plan, prioritizing pedestrians, not cannibalizing existing food and retail on Wadsworth and at the corners. And these uses, we know, would also have negative impacts to some existing residential areas, especially on that north side of 38th Avenue. But because the master plan is not specific, we are seeking council's direction on whether to prohibit auto-oriented uses in the new development. And then another topic related to uses is potential requirement for a mix of uses within the central area of the campus that were called zones 1 and 2 in the master plan. And we believe within those zones requiring some non-residential uses really necessary to ensure that there is mixed-use development and it's not 100% residential. Non-residential uses are civic, retail, office, or other commercial uses, so it's not just purely commercial. Civic can be included in that. But we've had some challenges with forcing minimum percentages or minimum square footages of non-residential uses within buildings or developments. It's not really viable because the market may not support these uses at all locations, and what we don't want is overbuilt or vacant commercial spaces on the property. However, we do feel it's still important to require a mix of uses, but leaving it vague enough that a developer can figure out what works for them and what might work for the city in terms of civic uses. Flexibility could include allowance for freestanding commercial, civic uses, or maybe non-residential uses in the ground floor of an apartment building. But what we're looking for here is providing a mix of land uses to meet the requirement of the master plan, but not really requiring any specific number or percentage. So asking council whether you all agree with that approach. And the next and last question I have before I turn it back over to Lauren is related to signage. So signage is another really important consideration for large developments so that there's some unity in design and standards. The city's current sign code does not work great for large campus development and is really, again, more applicable to single buildings and single lots. Master plan did not talk about signage at all. I think not one word was related to signage in the report, and that's fine. So we're seeking council's agreement on whether our approach to signage within the campus makes sense. We're really trying to avoid some mistakes and challenges on past large developments that we're still dealing with, while making sure that designs are cohesive and impacts on surrounding properties are minimal. Given that we don't know specifics of development just yet, we need to make sure that standards are flexible and less prescriptive than the standard sign code, and with greater limits on some more impactful signs like prohibiting tall monument signs or large electronic signs. So with that, I will turn it back over to Lauren to talk about some of our next steps.
Yeah, just a quick reminder. Like I mentioned, what we've been following, starting with the department is on the with direction tonight, welcome to the acting zoning regulations. You know, that's typically the further that the first quarter of next year. So we're at the
Okay. Counselor Hoppy, you have a general question to start with? Or are we, do you want to go through the questions 1, 2, 3, or are there questions now?
I was just going to give my comment on all the questions. How would you like to do it?
Why don't we go through question number 1? If that's okay, and then we'll just, then we kind of get them all. So question number 1 is staff is looking for consensus on the zoning framework to begin more detailed work, including the drafting of the MU-LLC zoning regulations. So this is sort of on an overview to move forward on the process they've outlined. And questions before we just go to a consensus? Are there questions on that anyone wants to pose now? Counselor Hoppy.
Thank you. Lauren, could you please put back the slide that's got all of the layers on it? It's got the low density and then the 3-story and the, right, one more, right there. Yeah. Okay, so here is my question. So we're talking about doing an overlay zone. But first off, I understand we are not here to get into the weeds. I just want to ask about these layers, like specifically, when we look at the zoning code, then are we going to do the code and then say, and here are the overlays? This yellow place is an overlay, the orange place is an overlay, where we're going to, the ballot question is going to be related to where the pink and purple is. And we're going to zone the site like kind of like a master development, but the overlays will be overlays over the zoning. Is that how that works?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we're going to write a whole new section of code that looks very similar to our mixed-use code, which fortunately has a precedent for a lot of illustrations. So we will likely include a map very similar to this graphic in the MU-LLC code section that says on the perimeter, the maximum height is 2.5 stories. We are calling it an overlay. It may not actually be articulated in quite that way in the final version, but we are going to write either through words and or pictures what the maximum heights are in the different zones on the property.
Okay, and are we going to say for so many feet, or are we just going to kind of?
It's a good question.
Kind of changes
Yeah, we're
sometimes?
trying really hard not to site plan this. The intent with that yellow strip, feel free to jump in here anytime, is that it's sort of the first row of development.
Okay.
So if you can picture on Dudley, it's a row of homes that are no taller than 2.5 stories, that are single unit or duplex, that are facing the other side of Dudley. We think that orientation will.
That fit within our setbacks.
That fit within our setbacks. Yep, they're not right up on the street. Feels like a Wheat Ridge neighborhood. We think that kind of a design will help to calm the traffic on Dudley. That's been an issue, right? It's totally vacant on one side, so it's just kind of feels like a speedway. We've talked about some design standards where maybe all the driveways have to be at the back so that you can have more on-street parking. That also slows it down. But what the depth of that lot is something we probably don't want to prescribe.
Great, and then bulk plate, of course, would apply.
Yes.
To all of it. Okay. I think this is fantastic. I think you guys did a great job pulling all the bits and pieces out of the master plan and putting together something that, and listening to the community and putting something together that really works. I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Counselor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Lauren. So without getting in the weeds too much, the one question I have regarding height is that, it says 7 stories or 90 feet. We all understand that, but to the average person, they might have assumptions that, yes, I'm okay with that, but it's also at an elevation that is different than the top. And so, if you were I don't know if you're looking at this, that it's going to be 90 feet for that entire area, you know, because like if you took the top elevation right now of the hospital and you applied that level over, you know, where it goes up on that hill, what would that height be from the road? Like, what would that difference be in how many stories right now?
Yeah, that's a good comment. Well, you're right. We'll talk a lot more about that on August 5th. The way our code reads right now, the building height is measured from the base of each individual building. So we're not planning to overhaul sort of how we measure height in Wheat Ridge. We will definitely talk about what are the appropriate heights, maximum heights in those areas of campus on the 5th,
Yeah,
as it relates to the topography.
okay, because yeah, I'm just wondering about the appetite on that, and then looking at that same general area where we do have the hospital that's 90 feet, and everybody's generally okay with that. Then we have, and this kind of bleeds into the blue house, is that then you have something that's very low in elevation that could potentially have a much taller elevation in that area. And has staff ever considered that relocating the building to somewhere where there would be less height? So say like in the middle, where you know, where elevation, that there might be more. Okay. Thank you.
Counselor Hulteen.
Thank you. In general, I think this is really great. One concern I've heard, you know, along 38th, but I think with, you know, some sensitivity to, you know, my constituents who live just north of here, is looking at that building height frontage right along 38th. There's a lot of concern about like the ice damming and like and so that particular height, if we were to be allowing that height or close to that height along that 38th strip. So I would love for this to contemplate a lower height along 38th to be more, I think, contiguous with sort of the experience of that being a very like residential strip currently. I am supportive of the future discussion here in a few minutes of the mixed use and bringing in the businesses. But I think, you know, the constituents I've talked to in that strip would like that to feel a little bit more in terms of bulk and height to conform with what exists along there with like the churches and stuff like that. So my request would be to look at shortening that right there along 38th Avenue.
Yeah, we've definitely heard that. And that call at the top, the setback or step back required based on building height, that was really meant to say like, we wouldn't want to see a 5 or 7 story building right at the sidewalk on 38th. Either pull it back based on height or some combination, or tier the building. So, you know, maybe it's only 3 stories on 38th and that kind of goes up as you get further away from the street. There's a lot of things to think about that.
It's hard to tell at this scale, but that blue strip is actually 100 feet. The front of the hospital is 100 feet away from the sidewalk on 38th Avenue, and that definitely came through loud and clear. So if there were to be a building in that, it would have to step down in height as it gets closer.
Maybe this graphic just needs to be a little bit more explicit of like, how does that translate to what would be that frontage? Because I think we're understanding in this conversation that that would translate to 3 stories-ish through there. But we need to make sure that this graphic is descriptive of that, because the way you look at it now, it looks like it could be. I mean,
it's hard to tell.
I get the extrapolation, but I think we need to make it really clear.
We can make a graphic more specific to that frontage.
Okay,
So
great,
it's zoomed in better. Yeah.
Thank you. And I had a question, and I think I probably know the answer, but we're assuming that the road network, the existing road network is going to remain?
Yes, good question. That is a correct assumption. Those are private streets right now. So far, we have communicated informally to inquirers that we would not like to inherit unknown private streets, that it would be privately maintained. And there were a couple provisions that we proposed in the zoning related to primary streets and probably not adding really any. The you've probably heard me say this, but the upside of it being an active hospital campus is it's very hard to find a land use that generates as many or more trips than a hospital campus. So we feel fairly confident that the infrastructure that exists is probably adequate for any future land use scenario. And we'll look at that through a traffic study, which I think you memorialized as a requirement of the concept plan.
And I see something in the memo about alleys, or possibly alleys. Yes. Counselor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor, and I appreciate the distance that we've come just, in the past few months, and really looking forward to how this all gets translated into something that actually becomes the zoning plan. In particular, it seems like the two important steps here that we have to keep in mind is that there's this process where a developer, hopefully a single developer, comes in and it's not parceled out. And then they're required to submit the concept plan based on what we decide in terms of the zoning. And so and then all of the, the public meetings and all the things that go with that. So yeah, I'm very much in support of question one, looking for a consensus on the zoning framework. I think you guys are on the right path.
Do we have consensus to affirm question number one? We do. Okay. Go to question number two. Question number two is, does council agree with staff's approach to prohibit auto-oriented uses in the MU LLC zone, including drive-throughs, gas stations, car washes, and auto sales? We have consensus on that. Do we have any? Oh, we have a question? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I do not support this. I believe that the approach to prohibit auto-oriented uses is bad policy, and it doesn't reflect the sort of flexibility built into some of the other aspects, including retail, commercial, and civic uses. Prohibiting auto-oriented uses in perpetuity is short-sighted. In 10 years, if the trends continue, the types of automobiles people will be driving will be different. They'll have different needs, and to force the auto service and auto maintenance and auto just basically upkeep to other neighborhoods, and to say that this neighborhood does not have any auto-oriented uses is again, it's short-sighted, and I think it was something that down the road, the city would probably come to regret.
Any other discussion on question number two? Councilor Hulteen.
Can you just clarify a little bit more in depth, like what would be covered under auto-oriented uses?
Sure. The ones in the report were the main four that we consider auto-oriented that are currently allowed in mixed use. So drive-throughs of any kind, fast food or bank. Gas stations is a big one. We actually get a lot of inquiries about new gas stations in Wheat Ridge, probably more than any other use, just to let everyone know. Auto sales and car washes, those are kind of the only ones that are allowed in mixed use. Mixed use zones already don't allow the more intensive auto-oriented uses, so like a contractor yard, outdoor auto repair, things like that. But those are kind of the top four, I would say, are what are considered auto-related uses that are currently allowed in other mixed use zoning, including 38th.
Okay, thank you. I support this just from, we're talking about actually principally creating a neighborhood here that's surrounded by neighborhoods. We're not talking about an entire corridor. And, over the last couple of years, we've heard repeated complaints from the neighbors around Canes about the noise pollution and that, should we allow drive-throughs? We don't really control the hours and how that impacts. And so I think, the type of businesses and the land use that orient towards that, gas stations, it just doesn't seem like a super viable location for gas stations. And there's a lot of car washes on 44th. And I will tell you, there's a car wash at the end of my street where I live at 44th and Allison. And almost every time somebody learns I'm their city council member who lives right around there, they complain about the car wash because it's light pollution at night. It's incredibly loud. And so if what we're trying to do is really invest in like what we're seeing here with wanting this to feel like a neighborhood, those are the types of uses that really bring in, it's not about the cars, but it's about like the additional